Prithvi Shantirantarikshagam Shantir Dyaus Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapah Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha. Sarve bhadrani pashyantu ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Sarvastaratu durgani sarvo bhadrani pashyatu. Sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all say what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayeti Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukham Te Namam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Last week we concluded Swamiji's paper on Hinduism, which was the major presentation that he made at the Parliament of Religions in Chicago. The subsequent talks, he gave several. There was a side section at that Parliament called the scientific section, in which they discussed more specific theological issues. And throughout that conference, after some of these major addresses were given, other speakers were invited to respond to some of the topics that were being discussed. So the small response that Swamiji gave that we will study today, that's on page 36. It's titled Religion, Not the Crying Need of India. Now, that was not really the title of the talk that he gave. So it was more a response to the discussion that was already going on. And so later on, they titled this response with, so the title was given later. As we will see, that this is a small response, but it's clear that this was a response to the missionary activities that were a big major activity, especially in the 19th and 20th centuries. It's still going on, but it was a much bigger force then than it is today, probably. I'm not very sure. I haven't done a lot of study on this. But let's read this. It's a very short response, and then we will discuss some of the important points that come up. So this was given on the 20th of September, the very next day after the paper that we just finished reading that was given. Christians must always be ready for good criticism, and I hardly think that you will mind if I make a little criticism. You Christians who are so fond of sending out missionaries to save the soul of the heathen, why do you not try to save their bodies from starvation? In India, during the terrible famines, thousands died from hunger, yet you Christians did nothing. You erect churches all through India, but the crying evil in the East is not religion. They have religion enough. But it is bread that the suffering millions of burning India cry out for with parched throats. They ask us for bread, but we give them stones. It is an insult to a starving people to offer them religion. It is an insult to a starving man to teach him metaphysics. In India, a priest that preached for money would lose caste and be spat upon by the people. I came here to seek aid for my impoverished people, and I fully realized how difficult it was to get help for heathens from Christians in a Christian land. So quite a powerful critique. One of the things that is always challenging in religious study is to see how intimately religious issues can get associated with social concerns, and then eventually it spreads to both economics, also to politics, and a whole lot of issues. And so separating out the cultural elements, the social elements, the political elements that somehow go and vitiate the field of religion is not always easy. And for many people, religion does become primarily a social thing. And so a lot of the evils that are associated with religions across centuries may not necessarily be with the theology of the tradition themselves, but with a lot of these other social, political, economic elements that come along with it. Because if we see the essential teachings of the scriptures of every religion, I see very little difference. The theology might be different, but that every world religion says, be good, be honest, be truthful, be unselfish, be loving, be kind, be charitable. And there is no difference. There is no disagreement about that. And yet, we see a lot of unhappiness, suspicion, fear when different religious traditions have come and face to face and have had to deal with these challenges. Now that is what he is referring to here. One of the questions that often comes is about sharing. Now the missionaries many of the missionaries who went to Asia and to Africa and these other lands, what was the mission? Again, I'm not here to give any very definitive answers, but one clear mission clearly was that here is something that has brought meaning, joy, fulfillment in our life, and the mission is to go and spread the good word. In fact, that's what the gospel means, the good news, and to spread it across the globe. And in itself, that's a wonderful, lofty goal. If there's something good and nice, why not share it with everyone? Up to this point, I think it's fine. The problem comes is, what do? I have this something to share, and if there is resistance from the people with whom I want to share it. It's like, now this is a rather simplistic example, but it's like here is a nice dish that you truly enjoy eating, and you find that it's nourishing, it's tasty, it's wonderful, and you want to go and then share it with everyone. And I think that's great. Why not? And then you go someplace else and you find the people have their own food. They're eating their own dishes, different from your dish. And then if you say, oh, no, that's a bad dish, that's not good, you eat this. And it's possible that some of them might be out of curiosity, they're sure, we'll be happy to have it. But there may be some who say, no, we are quite happy with our dish. And you say, no, you've got to eat this. And then you use force to say, we're going to kill you if you don't eat this dish. Or provide some incentives, exploit some of the kind of exploitation that can occur, and that has occurred in many of the missionary activities, especially in the last century, was many of these parts of the world they went to were poor. They're financially poor, they lacked some of the amenities. And in order to then make them accept this new teaching that they gave was this, well, if you accept this teaching, then we will give you money, or we will take care of your education, or if you are suffering, we'll provide you medical benefits. But it's not an unconditional giving. It's like, if you accept what we give you, only then. It's very conditional. And that's what Swamiji is pointing out here. That, and this is not simply theory. This has happened, and this continues to happen. I have had some amount of first-hand experience with this. Back in the, of course, it probably was much worse some decades ago, but even as late as sometime in the late 80s, when I was in the southern part of India, there was a big storm, and in there they call it the cyclone, a big cyclone. There's a lot of destruction in some of the southern districts of the state of Tamil Nadu, what is today called Tamil Nadu. And we got these frantic calls from people, that part of the country, where we didn't have a monastery. So we had a monastery up in the north. And so they called us up and said, could you please come and try to help us? And this was rather shocking, was that when a group from our monastery went and saw, and they found that the local people said that here there are some missionaries working and trying to help the people, but only on the condition, first of all, they're helping only Christians, and they would help non-Christians only on the condition that they become Christians. Otherwise, they won't provide help. And so the local people said that we should provide help only to, the majority in that part were Hindus, and said, we should provide help only to Hindus. Now that was a big dilemma for the order, because the Vedanta order, which when we go and help in these times of natural calamity, we don't even inquire of the religious identification of the person. We just help anyone. If you're suffering, here is what we can help. But here was this local community telling us, well, look, there are these other people helping, but they are helping only others. They are not helping us. So you should help only us. Now, these are the kind of dilemmas that can come. Of course, the order refused to say that, oh, we are going to only help you, we're not going to help them. But we said, well, we'll have a center open, providing help, and whoever comes, we will give it, irrespective of their religious tradition. And that was not a very popular stand, because the grievances and the bitterness was very strong, very, very clear. So these are the kind of difficulties that come. And so these are the kind of questions we can ask ourselves. In general, here it is specifically about religious help, but in general, whenever we have an opportunity to help someone else, how often is our help unconditional? How often do we help without expecting anything in return? And by that, I don't always mean necessarily a material benefit, but even gratitude. Most of us are willing to help, not that we are always trying to profit by the help that we give, but at the very least, many of us would want at least that, well, the person be at least grateful for what I have done. If you help someone and that person even refuses to say thank you, there's something in your heart and says, that was not good. This person should have been grateful. So a truly unselfish help would be that here is a need, I'm in a position to fulfill that need, and I'm going to do it. Here is someone suffering, it's possible for me to help alleviate that suffering to some extent, I'm going to do it, even if there is no gratitude. And so here is what he says, one other place you can see. He says, in India, a priest that preached for money would lose caste and be spat upon by the people. There is much said about the caste system in the Indian subcontinent. Now that's a big issue, and there's a lot of strands to it. But I just want to point out one important factor connected with these social groupings, which were called caste in India. And that is, in the early days, when this system kind of, there was never a committee of people who sat and decided these are the castes. It's a very organic growth that occurred over time. But the important thing was that in those early days, the purpose of having these social groupings was to have specific duties associated with these groups. So every caste had a duty. There's a Sanskrit word called dharma, and dharma, a major primary meaning of dharma means duty. So every group had a duty. And so the emphasis in the times in which we live today has greatly changed. We see that most constitutions of democratic societies the world over may not have very specific sections on duty, but they have very specific sections on rights. So we speak about fundamental rights. We speak about Bill of Rights. There isn't any Bill of Duties. There isn't any fundamental duties. But a right is meaningless unless the associated duty with it also is followed. And so that's the problem, the social problem of the times in which we live. Every one of us has become very conscious about what my rights are, but not everyone feels the need to be aware of what my duties are. And so that's one thing to be kept in mind. And so when he says here, India, a priest that preached for money would lose caste. So the priests in the social caste system, the priests were supposed to be those who did all the religious work. They officiated at all the sacraments, they studied the scriptures, and all of that. Now, the way the system got abused and degenerated was when people started thinking more about duties. When people, the quest for power became more important than the idea of duty. And clearly, that's, power can be very intoxicating. Think about it this way. Even in our workplace, when we speak about career advancement, of advancing or rising higher in our career, it sometimes may be good to look in our heart and say, it's wonderful to rise high in whatever career we choose. But then it's sometimes good to also ask, why do I want to rise higher? Well, for one thing, there could be very possible answers. One thing is, well, there's higher pay. I will earn more money. So money could be an incentive to rise higher. If I rise higher, then I have more power. I'll have more subordinates to work with. I exert greater control in the group or the organization I work with. So the desire for power, desire for wealth, desire for recognition, all of these could be playing a role in our desire to advance in life. Or there's also the other reason, what could be like, I just want to strive for excellence. That whatever skills, knowledge, energy I have, I want to make the best use of it. Of course, alongside that, wealth will come, recognition will come, power will come, all that may come. But is that the primary thing I'm seeking in life? And so the priests, because they claim to have knowledge of the hereafter, and they had knowledge of this language, Sanskrit, which is a very elitist language which the common people didn't know. So they exerted a lot of power over other sections of society. And so it was, then that's how the inequality in social groupings occurs. And what Swamiji is pointing out here is actually the priest that preached for money would lose caste. It doesn't happen now. The people who want all the privileges connected with that position, they make a lot of money, but they don't want to give up the privileges. Now, if you go to the original system as it was that the priests, because they had so much power, the rule was, their duty was, they cannot earn money. That is, they are not supposed to receive any salary. That they study, and whatever they study, they'll share with others. And then the society, the community, maintains them, takes care of their needs. But wealth cannot be a goal before them. So this was one thing that Swamiji points out here. And then he says, why did I come to the West? Now, in some sense, it is possible to see that Vivekananda himself was a kind of missionary. If missionaries have gone from the West to East, then Vivekananda, and before him, many of the Buddhist teachers before that, they could be seen as a kind of missionaries who left their homeland to distant places to come and share what was meaningful and beneficial to them. So sharing has occurred both ways, from West to the East, from East to the West. What is of interest here is, how did that sharing occur? Was force used to persuade other people to change their belief system? Was incentives used, and so on? And speaking of career options, how sometimes noble spiritual and religious values can get vitiated is one of the things you can see is that, so here is this noble ideal, yes, that we want to go and spread the gospel, spread the good news to everyone in the world. And as I said, that's wonderful. If the teaching that has benefited me can benefit others, can share with them, and they can enrich their lives, that's wonderful. But then you need an organization to kind of do things in an organized way, in a big scale. Because as an individual, you can do very limited. So if you want to do in a big scale, you need to come together. Now, if there's an organization, then you need rules, you need money to keep the infrastructure. Now, if you need money, then you need a revenue, you need sources to get that money. And so the missionaries, because they were undertaking all these missionary activities, they needed to generate a lot of income to go to the distant lands and spread this gospel. And so one of the ways they tried was to bring back such heartbreaking stories about how savage-like people in the East were, how much in need they were of help. And so clearly, people, those days, there was no internet, there was no this thing, so the only way you could know what was happening in distant lands was what this news that these missionaries and the traders and the sailors brought. And so they were told, oh, people there are suffering, people they are like a savage-like existence. And so out of compassion, people poured money into the missionary effort. So that's how revenue was generated. Now this revenue needs to be distributed. And how do you provide incentive to the people who are going to these lands? And so one of the ways, again, I'm not suggesting that that happened everywhere, but this was a major trend. And that was to provide incentive. It's like the kind of incentives sometimes people can bring in the marketing department of different companies today. How do you make people work harder? And if you say, well, if you sell or if you bring so much revenue, if you sell a certain number of products, then you get an extra bonus. That's the way you can make people work hard and provide them an incentive. So that similar thing happened in the missionary activity as well. The idea was, let's see how many people in this proselytization work, how many people you can convert to Christianity. Now, if you convert more people, you will get a promotion in your job, or you will get more money, or you will rise in the church hierarchy. So these were the kind of things then what it happens, that's how politics enters into the field of religion. Then it's no longer, the focus is no longer sharing what is meaningful to me. The focus becomes then a numbers game. That these are the numbers I have, and this is what I stand to gain. That's why the field of religion gets very vitiated by politics and by all these other elements entering into it. And Swamiji is pointing out that here. Now, although here is specifically referring, because he was addressing primarily the focus of the topic was the Christian missionary activity, and so he's directly focusing on Christians. But it's good to remember that it's not a problem only with the Christian missionaries. But this kind of mentality exists to a lesser or greater degree in every religious traditions. Most world religions are big enough and they are not monolithic. I mean, it's easy to just kind of say Christians are like this or Muslims are like that and Hindus are like this and Buddhists. It's never like that. Because remember, there are like millions and millions of people involved. And people are different. There are generous, broad-hearted people present in every tradition who are unselfish to the core. And on the other extreme, there are also extreme fanatics, having exclusivistic views. And every religion will have the spectrum of this. Liberals, conservatives, fanatics, fundamentalists, every religion. So it's a mix. And so whatever is the critique that Swami Vivekananda is offering here, we have to see it not as directed only to one particular tradition, but to religion itself. And then ask ourselves that question, that if I think of myself as a religious person, how unselfish is whatever sharing I do in my life? If I go and discuss my own spiritual ideas, my own belief system with someone who thinks differently, who believes differently, what am I really trying to achieve? What is my goal in that one? And so on. So a tiny little response, but a lot of strands of thought to think about. So I have now talked a lot. So I'm going to stop. Now, I would like to hear what your thoughts are, when you read this kind of a passage like this, what are the kind of ideas that come to your mind? Feel free to share what you feel.
Swamiji, on the topic of conditional help, it's kind of unrelated, but a thought came to my mind. Even in Boston, you come across people who are asking for alms. And sometimes it's not clear whether helping them with money or giving them something is really going to help them or actually hurt them. Because some of them are addicts, and oftentimes you are in a hurry, and to me it has happened where I made a judgment call and said this person is not deserving. I made that call, and I walked away. And then later on, a lot of times I'm questioning, did I do the right thing? Should I have spent more time understanding the person's situation? So is there any guidance on how to act in such circumstances?
No, I think we just have to follow our heart, because again, if you're stopping at a red light and someone comes and asks for something, there is no enough time to get to know the person, so you just have to follow your instincts and do what you believe is right. And again, as I said, since people are different, some people are going to say, no, this person is an addict. There's no point in giving. This person is just going to misuse the money. But there'll be also some other people who will say, well, it's not since I don't know. For all I know, this person may be genuinely in need of help. So it's not for me to judge. I'm going to give it and hope that it is used for good purpose. And there's some people who may not even give. And because people are different, this person who is asking for alms will get something. And how they use it, again, is really up to them. So one thing is, clearly we have to just make our own best judgment on that and be at peace with it. No point in just second guessing it all the time, because what's the point? You're not going to solve the problem one way or the other. But even when you give someone, it's sometimes good to pause and say, why am I giving it? As Swami Vivekananda points out in his Karma Yoga lectures, am I giving it like out of pity and compassion, which doesn't do me any good. It just kind of puts me on a higher pedestal and says, oh, you addict, you just kind of like, you have wasted your life. Anyway, I'm throwing this money at you. And that just kind of makes me it just builds my own ego. Or even if I give it with not that kind of an attitude, if I'm not careful, I can become still egoistic, like how charitable I am, how wonderful I am. Or if we see such hungry, homeless people around, sometimes in a very subtle way, it can produce a sense of guilt inside. It's like, oh, I have so much, and these poor people don't have anything, and I can't bear to see the sight. And sometimes, sometimes on television news or even on even descriptions on news, sometimes they will warn you in advance that, oh, there's going to be some disturbing pictures or disturbing news, kind of almost get ready for it. Why? Why is it done that way? Because sometimes seeing these things, we feel upset. And then if I go and help someone, that feeling of grief or that upset or guilt is kind of assuaged a little bit, in the sense that, oh yes, but I'm trying to do what I can. So a lot of these factors are working inside. So when I help someone, am I really thinking of helping that person? Or my primary motive is to remove this feeling of grief and kind of unsettled mind inside my heart? Or, yeah. So this is very, very subtle things are going on inside, and we have to be very clear. Yeah, and so there is no easy answer to that one, but one has to be at peace with whatever one decides, and one has to be very careful with one's own motives and intentions.
So this is not about the missionaries. This is something that you said in the middle, and it reminded me of something. So you mentioned about rights and duties. So it reminded me of this past month I was in Varanasi, and I was talking to this gentleman, and he was mentioning.
Hold it closer to you.
Sorry, and this past month I was in Varanasi, and then I was talking to this gentleman, and he mentioned how in olden times, if a king found out if any of the people in the praja were sleeping without eating anything, he was not allowed by his duty to sleep and eat until that man or woman person is fed. And also that the laws binding the king to his duties are actually extremely tough. And the king must look at his praja as children, not as anything else. So it really makes me think, because I feel sometimes in the democratic world today, no one has duties. Everyone just keeps fighting about rights, and even a president or prime minister comes in every 4 years, and then he doesn't really own anything. So, yeah.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Sorry.
About the help. About the helping question, like why do we help? Like, I think some time ago, if I remember correctly, you gave a beautiful explanation that if we feed the person that is hungry, is going to eat one day, but at the end, why do we have to help is for us? So like that's I mean, because by helping sincerely and by practicing helping sincerely, because maybe at the beginning you do it for yourself, but then if you keep doing it, at the end we'll manage to do it in the right way, and you'll be helped by you helping. So I think that's one view.
Good. Yep, that's true.
The idea of giving and helping without waiting for or expecting gratitude seems closely related to me to the idea of working without a right to the fruits or the results of our work, which is another theme that comes up in this world. Am I making that connection correctly?
Say that again and slowly. Yeah.
Yeah. Is this the Bhagavad Gita talks a lot about us not having a right to the fruits of our work. Mm-hmm. Is the idea of not expecting gratitude? Is this is this idea? Are these ideas related?
Yeah. So just because we don't expect gratitude does not mean we will not get it. It may come, it may not come. But if I'm expecting it, and if I don't get it, then I'm going to be unhappy. And that's why we should work without any expectations. So, and that's important to remember, that working without any expectation does not mean that things that people seek will not come. Wealth will come, recognition will come, everything will come. But because I'm not expecting it, if it does not come for any reason, I'm protected. But if I'm expecting it, and if it doesn't come, then I'm in trouble. That's the only reason. Yeah. Shika?
Swamiji, looking at what Swami Vivekananda has done or achieved, he must be talking about getting our money or help for the country at that time. I believe that his contribution is more of generating self-respect for our own people, about our own religion. I believe that at that time, people were not even respecting our own religion and not feeling proud about what we have, our own culture or our own values. So by coming here and teaching others and getting respect for himself and our religion, that contribution is more than what money he has earned or he sent it back, I feel. Even that holds good now too. I feel there are a lot of organizations we have in India who might be helping or giving money or doing charity more, but Ramakrishna Mission is contributing towards this, I feel.
Yeah, that's true. But also we have to kind of look at the historical context, because that time India was under British rule and there was a lot of poverty. I mean, poverty is there even today. Sometimes the poverty in the Indian subcontinent gets kind of hidden in the sense that in the last 20 or 30 years after the liberalizing of economy, there's this big middle class. And so at one level, you just think about how much progress India is making in different fields, and it is. That's true. It is making a lot of progress. But there is also the underbelly. There is still poverty, but that doesn't often get the focus. And it was much more during Swamiji's time. There wasn't this big, thriving middle class that we have today. And so what Swamiji saw, in fact, he discusses that in many other lectures later on as well, was the ideal person of the future would be one who incorporates in oneself the best of the East and the best of the West. And so this was way before people had even started thinking about globalization. So that time Swamiji was clear that here is this very rich, ancient spiritual heritage that he has inherited. And so his idea was, here is something that I can share. So India doesn't go, the East doesn't have to go to the powerful West simply with a begging bowl, that it can be a healthy exchange. There is something that the East can share with the West, and there is a lot that West can share with the East. And so Swamiji said that the ideal person of the future would be to have this, the inner life, the enrichment of the inner life, that is so much that can be learned from Eastern tradition, like Hinduism, Buddhism, and so on. But there is also what Swamiji said is the power of organization, the social discipline and organizing, which is much, much better, much superior in the West than in many Eastern countries. And so what Swami Vivekananda saw was that can we bring these two together to get this kind of social responsibility, discipline, the power of organization, which is perfected in Western societies, and combine it with this inner, more contemplative, inward-looking life. So rather than these remaining as, like, who was it who said, Longfellow, East is East and the West is West, and never the twain shall meet. But the ideal person of today is who can bring together both these. Because there is every culture, every tradition has something to share. There are certain strengths that everyone has. And if we can pull these strengths together, then we are in a much better shape to deal with the challenges of the future. And this is so true, not just with regard to the East and the West and different religions, but also in all interpersonal relationships, even in a family. Clearly, as members of a family, we share some common characteristics, but also people are different, even within a family. Everyone has certain strengths and certain weaknesses. So I, as a person, may not have all the skills that I need. But family as one unit can pull together their skills and their knowledge, and then they can be a very powerful, useful contributor to community. And so even in the context of the family or our friends or our workplace, we can see that what strengths I have, let me try to share it with someone else and learn from them those aspects in which they are strong. So this kind of sharing occurs at various levels, at interpersonal levels, at intercity levels, interstate, countries, religion, yeah. And maybe in future, intergalactic, if you are into science fiction. Mahendra?
So, Swamiji, coming back to the conversion for Christianity, but in India, even now and even then, when Swamiji was around, there was a lot of conversion, partly because of the treatment of the Dalits and some of the people who were considered as lower caste. Mm-hmm. How do you explain to that? Because he wasn't, I don't think he mentioned in here, but I think he had been also very critical about that part of India, which sort of made those people...
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That's true. And yes, there was some, in fact, in the, I don't remember exactly, maybe in the 30s or 40s, there was a mass migration led by Dr. Ambedkar, who was the chairman of the committee which then formulated the Indian Constitution, that a kind of a revolt against these abuses of the caste system. And a big number of people then converted to Buddhism because the Buddhism said, well, you are free from this caste. This thing. So these things have occurred. That's true. Sometimes conversions have occurred. Because like, oh, if you become a Christian, you're free from the caste. I think it didn't always work out. I say that because I think the mistake that was often done was to think that caste system is a part of Hindu religion, but I think it's more a part of Indian society than Hindu religion. And so a lot of people who converted to other traditions, thinking that, oh, now I'm out of the caste system, didn't really happen because they're still living in the same social order. So merely that I just change what I hang in my neck, I just remove a Ganesha and put a crucifix there, but if I still have to go to the grocery store, I still have to go about in the same community where I live. So merely just changing my affiliation, people don't suddenly say, okay, now you're not an this caste anymore. In fact, and this will sound odd, that there are several Christian communities in India that, well, technically, theologically, they shouldn't belong to any caste. But even today, probably more 30 or 40 years ago, but I'm sure there are some Orthodox families even today, even among Christian families in certain parts of India, when they have to, there's an arranged marriage in the family, they would still look at what the caste of the other family was, although both people involved may be Christians. So it's still there. I mean, it's still kind of so much ingrained into the DNA, if you like. Yeah, it's tough. In fact, not too long ago, in 1985, the Pope John Paul II, he made a visit to India. And so I was in Chennai, in southern India at that time, and there's a very ancient church there called the Santhome Church. And the myth is that St. Thomas visited that, which is contested. But it's a fairly, at least, the church was built by the Portuguese sometime in the 15th and 16th century. So it's a fairly old church. Now, in that church, they still had separate pews for the untouchable Christians. In other words, people who were considered from a lower caste Hindus and who were then converted to Christianity, but they were still lower caste Christians. And so they were not allowed to sit in certain parts of the church. So there was still the segregation in the church, even though they had converted. And then there was this so they wanted to present a memorandum to the Pope. Pope was staying in the Archbishop's bungalow, which is next to the church, to show that, well, there is discrimination. We are now Christians, and there was not supposed to belong to any caste, but we are not treated equally. And then it became a big issue, and it created headlines in the local papers. And then the Archbishop refused to allow them and gave them an audience with the Pope. Next, they took a big procession. It was quite bad. So, I mean, again, there are just a few examples to show that sometimes identifying these social groupings only with a specific tradition doesn't always work. You're still a part of the thing. And that's why I have found it helpful to look upon caste as a part of the Indian society rather than a Hindu religion. That makes a lot of things very clear. Yeah. Any other ideas, thoughts? Okay, so we will stop here today, and next week when we meet, we will take up the next presentation that Swamiji gave on Buddhism. Buddhism, the fulfillment of Hinduism. We'll do that next week. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. So this week, upcoming, we have two big pujas. On Friday, we'll have the Shivaratri puja. It begins at 6:30 in the evening until 9:30. Those of you who have come earlier know, and those of you who are coming for the first time. So this Shivaratri puja, we worship Shiva. One of the characteristics of this puja is a lot of people often observe fast during the day. So that's not mandatory. So if you would like to observe fast, one way to do that would be to not have any solids that day. Just have liquids, water, tea, coffee, fruit juice, that's fine throughout the day. A little bit of fruits if you need. And then after the puja ends at 9:30, there'll be a lot of hot khichdi prasad, and you can have a good sumptuous dinner after the puja. So that's one way to do it. But for whatever reason, if you don't observe a fast, you're still welcome for the puja. You can still participate in it, and you'll be able to make a flower offering in the end as well. So all of you are welcome for the puja on Friday evening. That's at 6:30. And then on Sunday, we'll have another puja, and that is to celebrate the birthday of Shri Ramakrishna. So that puja will be the morning, 10:30 in the morning, and have a good breakfast. No fasting is needed for Sunday. And then we'll have, again, a good lunch prasad around 1 o'clock on Sunday. So two pujas, Friday and Sunday. Therefore, we will not have the Saturday meditation because to preparation for the puja. And then next Wednesday, we will continue this study. So let's conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the great spirit of the Native Americans and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto you.